In this brief video, we share why and how FDX tax differs from FDX banking. Tax means U.S. tax, specifically U.S. income tax. And the focus is the tax prep use case. In this use case, tax data means data contained in tax documents. When we use the term tax document, we mean a form or statement issued to a taxpayer by a third-party data provider. In the tax prep use case, the term data provider translates to tax document issuer, and the term data recipient means tax software application. To give you some history of the work done by the FDX Tax Task Force. The Tax Task Force was first organized in the spring of 2019. The existing specification was DDA version 2, which included 9 tax documents. Over the spring and summer of 2019, the task force added 25 tax documents to the FDX schema for a total of 34. In 2020, 16 more tax documents were added. In 2021, we added support for reporting by cryptocurrency platforms and applications that are not required to file Form 1099-B. The goals of the Tax Task Force include the basic goals of FDX but extend beyond them to include the following goals. Our central consumer-focused goal is to define standards for use by the tax ecosystem, which will streamline the income tax return preparation experience of taxpayers and tax preparers. Tax document data is a large portion of the data needed to prepare U.S. income tax returns. Our goals include minimizing the need to manually enter tax document data into tax software. Our goals also include steering the industry away from OCR solutions. Replacing the need to parse native PDF is also our goal. Our work includes establishing industry standards that obviate the need to deliver data in non-standard data formats such as CSV. Providing a successor to tax exchange format is another objective we have. FDX tax is different than FDX banking and investments in a number of ways. The first difference is that tax data extends outside the realm of data produced by financial institutions. Yes, there is a long list of tax documents issued by financial institutions. However, there is an even longer list of documents issued by other types of companies. And the size of these businesses ranges from very large corporations to very small partnerships and sole proprietors. We are developing standards that work for the tax document ecosystem as a whole, which extends beyond financial institutions. And the number of these businesses is in the tens of thousands. The second significant difference is in the volume of data involved. Tax is about conveying the data for one tax document per year from the issuer to the tax software used by the recipient. Another significant factor is the fact that the production of tax documents and hosting of tax document data is frequently outsourced. The taxpayer does not have a direct relationship with the company producing their tax documents. The next difference is that there are relatively few data recipients, that is, tax software companies. But data aggregation is currently not available in the tax space. These differences impact how FDX tax adoption can be accomplished. Let's examine the impacts. Because of outsourcing, an OAuth flow is frequently not available. Accordingly, an alternative to OAuth was developed by the task force. Many tax data providers are small and cannot justify the cost to set up and operate an API server. And many larger companies cannot justify the expense to serve one document per year per recipient. Even if every tax data provider had an API server, the challenge of setting up data sharing agreements between providers and recipients is a blocker to such adoption. Given these differences, solutions above and beyond FDX standard APIs have been defined by the Tax Task Force. The Tax Task Force has defined 5 ways that data providers and recipients can implement FDX tax. Because of these differences, there are 3 data distribution channels and a total of 5 different ways to implement FDX tax. There are 2 acceptable types of FDX tax API implementations. There is one FDX tax paper tax document implementation, and there are 2 FDX tax file download possibilities. First, the 2 API implementation possibilities. This diagram depicts the idea that a taxpayer can authorize tax software to retrieve tax document data from a data provider, The data provider may be the tax document issuer, or the tax document issuer may outsource the hosting of tax data to a trusted service that has an API relationship with the tax software application. If a data provider already provides banking or investment data using FDX APIs, extending that system to provide tax data makes sense. In such circumstances, an API with OAuth authorization flow is available and is the ideal solution. In cases where tax data hosting is outsourced to a trusted third party, an OAuth flow might not be possible. After several meetings with the Security Working Group, RFC 135 was drafted and approved. RFC 135 allows for API authorization to be accomplished through the use of document-based credentials. The tax document contains two pieces of data that the taxpayer enters into tax software. The tax software then submits a GET request to the resource server with a request header as seen here. Instead of a bearer token, the header includes the document credentials encoded with base64 encoding. FDX tax can also be implemented when tax documents are printed and mailed to recipients. The FDX tax specification defines how tax document data can be encoded in a QR code and read by a tax software smartphone app. The QR code contains the document data itself, not a URL. Scanning QR codes is far more reliable than taking a picture of a document with a smartphone and using OCR to process the form. FDX tax can also be implemented using file download as a distribution channel. There are two types of files that can be downloaded. While the concept of file download and upload might seem low-tech when compared to an API, downloading a file and dragging it into a tax software app can actually involve fewer user actions than an API flow. But more than that, this approach works for the many companies for which setting up a server, establishing data sharing agreements with many tax software companies, onboarding, testing, etc., does not make sense for one tax document per year. The first file download implementation especially applies where data providers currently allow for non-standard data file downloads such as CSV or the older TXF and XML formats. They can add the download of data in the FDX tax JSON format for import into tax software. The JSON file would contain the same payload as would be returned by the FDX tax API. The second file download implementation was defined in RFC 175. The RFC title reads FDX Enriched PDF with Embedded Data. RFC 175 takes advantage of a PDF feature known as custom properties. Custom properties are key value pairs. By serializing the document data to a JSON string and placing the string in a custom property value, the data can be extracted by tax software applications with 100% reliability and without the need to write custom PDF parsing code. Embedding FDX JSON is a relatively small development effort. Please contact a member of the FDX Tax Task Force if you have questions.